Dr. Sarah Bunin Benor, HUC-JIR, Professor of Contemporary Jewish Studies. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. I think I've been teasing people. We have about 23 out of 24 good hours in a day with two little ones at home. And that's not bad.
Not bad at all.
So you're living in Los Angeles, a city that has been in the news, and certainly your governor in the news. Before we dive into tonight's topic, how are you feeling? How is the city coping with COVID-19?
Yeah, well, there are certainly a lot of cases here in LA, and my husband is a doctor. He works in a homeless clinic and a jail clinic, and so he's been seeing more and more cases of coronavirus.
That's particularly hard, as those are two communities that are particularly hard hit and without access to many of the resources.
Exactly.
How is he holding up?
Yeah, he's doing fine. He actually did a drive to collect masks, and he managed to get thousands of masks donated. So at least there's some level of protection. And it does seem that people in LA are pretty good about wearing the masks.
I'm glad to hear that. It's something that I think we all need to be cognizant of and trying to do every single time we leave the house.
Yeah, I hope everyone in Pittsburgh is doing okay.
I think so. We are slowly adjusting to this new reality, and it is not easy adjusting to a new normal and recognizing the public health value of what we need to do to keep others safe is a good impetus to doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough time for everyone.
That's right. So let's dive into our topic for the evening, and I'm so grateful for your time. You've been offering an online lecture series about language and about the American Jewish community. So I'm going to publicize to the community, and I will put in the chat box for those who are listening to us outside of the synagogue, how they might access the final talk coming up this Thursday. But could you give us a sneak peek of the subject, Jewish personal names around the world? I'm curious what you'll be talking about.
Sure. Well, I'm going to be talking about Jewish tradition and creativity and assimilation and distinctiveness. I'm going to show how throughout history, Jews have used the local names, but also their own Hebrew names and other distinctively Jewish names. And so that enabled them to integrate into their local society, but also maintain their distinctiveness. And then I'm going to show how American Jews are continuing that tradition by looking at the names that Jews choose for their babies and their pets.
What would be an example of something that might be that uniquely American Jewish integration?
Sure. Well, many American Jews have an English name and a Hebrew name, or a secular name and a religious name, right? And so, somebody might be named Andrew, but their Hebrew name might be Avraham. Or they might have, and those names are similar in sound. Sometimes they might have names that are similar in meaning. So for example, and this is not just about their English and Hebrew name, but also about the people that they're named after. So you might have somebody named Bella that's named after their grandmother Shana, because they both mean beautiful. Or perhaps Yafa, named after Shana, where Yafa is Hebrew for beautiful. So there are definitely creative ways that Jews are doing this assimilation and distinctiveness, and also the tradition and creativity.
This is one of the questions as a congregational rabbi that I get asked all of the time. How do I choose a Hebrew name? Mm-hmm. So if you would, let's start with the newborn. You've already shared a couple of ways we might maintain tradition or name after an ancestor with some modern updates. Can you share just a little bit more about ways people might consider or things they should be thinking about as they're considering newborn names in 2020?
Yes, I actually offered an elective about Jewish names and naming for rabbinical students at Hebrew Union College, where I teach, the Reform Training Seminary.
I knew I should have gone to LA instead of Cincinnati.
Oh, there you go. Well, It's not too late. You could always do some continuing education with us. So yeah, that was a really fun class, and we actually did an exercise about that where I gave the students some scenarios about, a couple comes to you with they're expecting a baby and they need some advice about how to name the baby, and so we came up with a lot of creative ideas. So one idea is naming using the meaning and sound, like I've already discussed, but there are other ways to do this. You can name after, if you're naming after a relative, and in some traditions this is after a living relative, in other traditions it's after a deceased relative, then you can use an aspect of their personality, or a place that they were from, or the time of year that they were born or died. There are so many ways to name after a person. I'll give you some examples from my own children. I have 3 daughters, and they all have names that are in honor of our ancestors, but are not exactly the same as those names. So Eliza Rose is named after my grandmother Ethel, my husband's grandmother Estelle, and then 2 great-grandmothers named Rose. And so Eliza sounds a little bit like Ethel and Estelle, right? It has similar sound patterns. And then Dahlia Rina is named after a grandfather named Zalman. Well, Simon, but his Hebrew name was Zalman. So Zalman sounds like Dahlia. And Henry, it's almost an anagram, Rena Henry, right? But it's also based on his interests, because he was really into music and a very happy man. And Rena means joyful melody. So, and then finally, Ariella Tamar. Ariella is after my grandfather, Yehuda Leib. Now, you might be wondering, what does Ariella have to do with Yehuda Leib? Well, Yehuda is Judah, the tribe of Judah, and the symbolic animal of that tribe is the lion, based on blessings that are in the Torah. And actually, throughout history, the name Judah has been paired with names that mean lion, like Leo, Leon, and Leib in Yiddish means lion. So, and Ariella means lion, or lioness of God. And so we chose that name in honor of my grandfather. And then her middle name, Tamar, is because she was born right around Martin Luther King Day and Tu B'Shvat. And Tu B'Shvat, Tamar, the date tree, is a symbol of that. And Martin Luther King, Tamar, Martin, it's again kind of an anagram. So you see all the creative ways that people can name babies in honor of people, or to use names from our tradition, but also use local names in interesting ways.
I can also see that I'm going to need to remove this before my 4-year-old gets old enough to use Facebook, lest she become embarrassed by how little we thought about her name compared to all of the different possibilities out there. Those are beautiful names and amazing connections.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's amplified even more when you're an adult choosing a Hebrew name, whether you're a conversion candidate, whether, I understand in some parts of the community there's a tradition of a renaming as a way of changing one's fortunes in life, or asking for a prayer for health, or evading that fate. What additional considerations does one add to the party when speaking with adults or when choosing their own name?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that people who convert to Judaism can do the same kinds of things as people who are choosing names in honor of people. If they're choosing a Hebrew name that's going to be used just for ritual purposes, or if they're changing their name for every interaction, then they can go based on the sound of their English name, or their secular name, their pre-Jewish name, or based on the meaning, or they can just choose a completely different name that doesn't have anything to do with those things. And they have an additional consideration. In addition to the first name, they have to choose how they're going to be called to the Torah. Are they going to be called, let's say their name is Rachel, that they choose, then are they going to be Rachel Bat Avraham Visara, which means Rachel, daughter of Abraham and Sarah, which is common for people who convert to Judaism? Or are they going to choose to use their parents' names? So let's say their parents are Jane and Sanford. So are they going to be Rachel, Bat, Sanford, Vijane, right? Or some people who convert actually choose to use names of their spiritual parents. They might choose, if they have a Jewish mentor, they might choose them to be their spiritual parents and go by that when they're called to the Torah. Or they might choose their favorite biblical characters. Maybe they don't identify with Abraham and Sarah in the Bible, but they're really into Ruth, or they're really into some other characters. So they can choose those biblical names as they are the child, the spiritual child of those biblical characters.
It is a whole lot to think about. And I know for those conversion candidates that I have the honor of working with, slapping down Kolach's new name dictionary opens up more questions than it does. Like, Rabbi, I just wanted an answer. Are there, what would you say is most common what are we seeing when it comes to using your parents' name? Is it more common in Reform Jewish circles now that you're seeing anecdotally to go with Avraham Sarah, or to use your, I guess, biological or those parents you relate to in your secular life outside?
Yeah, I don't have quantitative data on that, but I would ask you for anecdotal data on it. What are you seeing more?
Both.
Both?
I would say Avraham and Sarah reign a little bit more, but it is a fraught question, particularly when one's parents are living. So it's not to send the wrong message with this.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting question. And I wonder, have you seen any hybrid models where they might say, Bat Avraham Visara Vid Jane Visanford?
Ooh, I have not. Although I've seen a hybrid model where they said, Rabbi, we're comfortable with this to be called up to the Torah to receive a blessing. Boy, we'd really like for our ketubah to say this as a way of keeping the peace.
Yeah. It's a very complicated issue.
It is indeed. Well, I'm so looking forward to your talk on Thursday. And again, hopefully we have some good South Hills residents of the south suburbs of Pittsburgh tuned in. Thank you so much for your time and for giving us some additional considerations to think about as we think about naming the young people or adults in our lives.
My pleasure, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy.
You too.